You need a moment, Mr. Diamond? Go ahead, take all the time you need.
I'm okay.
Bang, bang. Is that what you said?
That's what I said.
Bang. Enough time to think before you shot the other shot, Mr. Diamond? Bang. Enough time to make up your mind whether or not to pull a trigger, Mr. Diamond? Bang, bang.
Excuse me, Your Honor, may we proceed in due course with one question at a time rather than this summary?
Withdrawn. Bang.
You'll stand when you make an objection.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Bang, bang. Do you think there was enough time between those two bangs to make up your mind whether or not to pull the trigger a second time?
I didn't make up my mind to pull the trigger, sir.
Well, if you had done it intentionally, Mr. Diamond, as opposed to accidentally, do you think there's enough time for you to think, bang, bang, whether or not to pull a trigger a second time? Yes or no?
Yes.
Now, you are facing an extraordinary length of time in jail should you be convicted of this crime. Is that correct?
That's right.
You're facing, in fact, life without parole. Is that fair to say?
Yes.
You will never see the light of day again as a free man should you be convicted. Is that right?
Yes.
And would you do anything to save the rest of your free life under those circumstances, Mr. Diamond?
Not anything, sir.
Would you, well, would you lie, Mr. Diamond?
No.
To get out of facing the rest of your life. How old are you, Mr. Diamond?
33.
What do you figure? You got another 50, 60 years of life ahead of you?
I sure hope so.
Now, as you're sitting there today, or before this trial began, looking at the possibility of 50 or 60 years in jail, are you telling us, I'm not saying you're lying right now, but are you telling us that you wouldn't lie under those circumstances to get yourself out of that potentiality?
Asked and answered, Your Honor.
Now, if I understand your background, you're a judo or martial arts expert, correct?
Yes, sir.
You're a firearms expert, fair to say?
Small arms, specifically.
Specifically the type of weapon that was used in the death of Trudy Doyle, correct?
Yes.
You've got a great degree, perhaps the finest military training on earth under the Marine Corps, correct?
I sure did.
You served in real battle under extremely stressful circumstances, correct?
Yes, sir.
Were you wounded in that war, by the way?
Yes, I was.
Did you receive a medal?
Yes, I did. I got a Purple Heart.
Fair to say you're a war hero as well, correct?
I never think of myself as that.
And you, in all of your training, the one thing that you learn in military training, in firearms training, but especially in your martial arts training, is how to get out of harm's way, right? Is that fair to say?
Sure, that's part of it.
Well, a large part of it is to get out of a bad situation and not exacerbate it, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And in getting out of harm's way, one of the things you know as an expert, and in fact teach as an expert, is to disarm an armed individual, correct?
Yes, sir.
By the way, in the martial arts, am I correct in understanding that the martial arts, amongst the self-defense methods that are practiced there, that they also teach, and you as an expert, I guess, have a high level of this, of an ability to relax under stressful circumstances. Is that fair to say?
Sure.
And wanted it, in particular, to maintain your calm and your ability to deliberate rationally under violent situations. Is that fair to say?
Violent situations?
Violent,
yes.
right?
Yes.
Now, in disarming someone with a firearm, the best way, and this is what you're taught in any martial arts course, the best way to avoid somebody with a gun from shooting it is to get that gun out of the direction of pointing at you, correct?
That's fair to say.
And wouldn't it be fair to say that the first and primary technique in avoiding that gun is to swipe it to the side so it's not pointing at your body any longer, correct?
No, that's not. You could swipe it down.
Down would still be pointing at your legs or perhaps a vital organ of yours, correct?
Could be.
Up would be pointing at a vital organ of yours, correct?
Could be, sir. There are many different ways to disarm.
Is that correct,
someone.
Mr. Diamond, yes or no?
Yes, it is.
I understand there are many ways. That's what you were about to say, to disarm an individual, right?
Yes.
But the first, the best way to avoid being struck by a bullet is to make sure the gun isn't pointed at you, correct?
It's logical.
Right. And the best way, if it's available to you, if you can do it in certain circumstances, is to get the gun pointing in a different direction, to the side, not up or down at your body, correct? That's the best way, right?
It would depend on the circumstance.
Well, this gun with the safety off and cocked could go off accidentally at any time if someone's hand was still on the trigger, right?
Yes.
Sorry, Your Honor, this gun refers to the very Mauser in evidence, or is he talking in more hypothetical terms?
The Mauser, Your Honor, excuse me. I'm referring to your off-duty service gun, okay? The gun that was introduced in this case, that is your gun, right, the Mauser?
Yes.
Okay. People's number one, right?
Yes.
And that gun, in an uncocked, which one? In a cocked position with the safety off, if someone's finger is on the trigger, can go off at any time, accidentally or intentionally, as long as there's pressure put on that trigger, correct?
That's correct.
So if it's pointed downward, it could accidentally shoot in the leg, right?
Yes.
If it's pointed upward, it's a threat to any vital organ in your body and could result in death to the person, correct?
Yes.
If it's off to the side, not pointing at you, it can't, even if it goes off, kill you or hurt you in that position, correct?
No, sir.
Is that correct or incorrect?
That's incorrect.
I'm talking about...
If the gun is fired in a small area, it could ricochet and still kill you.
You were standing in a vestibule on December 1st where there were glass plate windows surrounding you at a level of 4 feet, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Now, let's talk about what could happen. The likelihood of a bullet hitting you, if it's upwards and it accidentally goes off and pointed at your chest, is 100%, right?
Yes.
If it's pointed at your leg, it's 100%, right?
Yes.
If I point it over there, the likelihood of it ricocheting is possible but very slim, right?
Depend on the circumstance.
Would you suggest to this jury that if the gun that you allegedly knocked from Trudy was pointed in a direction other than directly at you, if it had been withdrawn? I'll rephrase. Mr. Diamond, if the gun had been pushed aside and pointed at the glass plate windows that day on December 1st, do you believe the likelihood of you being struck by a bullet would have been the same as if you had knocked it up and the gun was still pointed at you? Do you think the likelihood is the same?
You're saying it was pointed at the glass as opposed to one of the vending machines?
Anywhere. Anywhere other than directly at you, do you think the likelihood of you being struck by a bullet would have been the same?
Same, no.
Less, right?
That's right.
Bullet could go anywhere off a ricochet, right?
That's right.
If it went through the glass windows that were as low as 4 feet, it wasn't ricocheting at all, right?
Yes, sir.
But you didn't move with all your expertise to move that gun to the side, right, and grab it, correct?
That's right.
You didn't move to knock that gun to the ground, correct?
That's right.
And by the way, if you had knocked it to the ground, a blow going down with your arm is far more forceful than one going up, correct? Would you agree with me? Common sense.
Yes, sir.
So of all the possibilities, the way to disarm Miss Doyle on that day that you chose was to knock the gun in an upward direction. That's what you said, correct?
Yes, sir.
The one direction where if it had gone off accidentally as it had moved upward, if it was still in the path of your body, may have resulted in your death, correct?
Yes, sir.
Now, you holstered your off-duty revolver, isn't that correct?
Yes, sir.
You didn't wear it in your waistband generally, isn't that correct?
Generally.
In fact, when you practiced with Trudy Doyle, withdrawn, you stated on direct examination that in your practices with Trudy Doyle, she was practicing taking the gun from your waistband when you practiced with her. You remember that testimony?
Yes.
That was a misstatement, wasn't it?
That's correct.
Yeah. And she actually practiced, whenever she practiced with you, she practiced taking the gun from your holster, correct?
Yes, but it was a waist
Mr.
holster.
Diamond, yes or no, correct?
Yes.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but this was a standard police holster, correct?
I don't know what you mean by standard, sir.
When you as a police officer are carrying a gun, you're carrying a gun in a holster that has a special clip in it, a clip with force to hold the gun in, not entirely, but to hold it in to make it more difficult for a stranger or a criminal to lift it from you during a struggle or some other crime, correct?
Are you talking about a side holster that's holding a revolver, like a Smith & Wesson?
The side holster was withdrawn. I'm talking about the side holster that you wore.
Yes, they have a clip. The
Correct?
side holster.
Right. And that's the side holster that you practiced with Trudy Doyle with the gun, the Mauser. No? You had two side holsters?
No, the holster that I had for the Mauser was a waist holster. It's the kind of a holster that you often see detectives wearing, where it even looks like it's in the waist.
I don't know what I often see. Why don't you testify, okay?
It's a holster that clips on to the belt, and it can be clipped either inside the belt or outside.
And that holster has a clip in it too, doesn't it? Yes or no?
It's not the same kind of a clip.
But it does have a clip with some degree of pressure to prevent that gun from being taken out from even a detective, doesn't it?
Yes, sir.
So in fact, on December 1st, when you say she tried to take this from your waistband, that was an attempt at something that she had never tried before because the practice was when you wore it in a holster on the waist, correct?
That's
right?
correct.
Now, in addition to being a firearms expert, you would have to go, standard procedure, to the range and practice firing your weapons, correct?
Yes, at least twice a year.
Okay, and you would, well, isn't it a fact that as an expert and you trained people, you had to go there more often to maintain that level of expertise?
I'm not sure exactly what the rules were. I had attained a level. I went more than twice a year.
Okay. And in doing so, you would practice not only with your service revolver, but you would practice with your Mauser, right?
Sure.
Of course, you have to know how that operated, right?
Sure.
Right. And could you show the jury, if you don't mind, the police stance when trained to fire a weapon, in firing a weapon?
There are many stances.
Could you show them which one? When you fire a weapon at the training ground or in any other situation, you fire the weapon with two hands?
Generally.
Yes. And the Mauser has a certain amount of recoil on it. You heard the testimony on that, right?
Most guns have recoil.
Correct. And recoil is when the gun kicks back after you fire a bullet, right?
Yes.
Okay. And the Mauser kicked back, you heard that, right?
But the Mauser kicks back very little in
15
comparison.
degrees. Would you agree with that?
Sure.
Okay. And it kicks back even if you held it with two hands, right?
It kicks back somewhat, but very little.
After firing the gun at a firing range, which one? When you go to the firing range with that Mauser and you fire the weapon, it would kick back a little, right?
Yes.
And in order to fire it again, you'd naturally bring the gun down and point and fire, correct?
Sure.
Because if you fired it after you kicked back, it'd go up in the air, right?
Sure.
Okay. Even when you held it with two hands, it would be a kickback, right?
Somewhat.
And is it fair to say that if you, which one? Is it fair to say that after accidentally firing this weapon on December 1st, that since you weren't even ready for it to fire, it kicked back far more than when you were ready and prepared on the firing range practicing with that gun?
I don't remember how much it kicked back at that moment.
You weren't ready for it to fire then, right?
No, I was not.
Your muscles weren't ready for that gun to be fired, right?
That's right.
You weren't trying like you do in the pistol range to hold that gun steady, right, with two hands.
That's right.
It accidentally went off, and certainly the recoil mechanism wasn't any different than any other day that you fired the gun, right?
That's right.
Is it fair to say that it must have thrown your hand back more than on the pistol range, more than just a little?
It threw my hand back.
You remember that now?
It had to.
Okay. And do you really